especially after I have seen the jury personally on Wednesday.
What did you see for the jury? What did you see?
They are bored. They are bored out of their skulls. They are waiting for action. Just like you have to remember, jurors are no different than you or I or the people watching the stream. Just the same feelings that you are feeling when a witness is testifying, those same eye rolls that you go, oh my God, did they seriously just say this? When you want to get up and get yourself a cup of coffee because you can't stand that, all of that the jurors are feeling. And I saw that with my own eyes on Wednesday, 2 days ago when I was in court. When Adam is asking questions of his witness, most of the jurors' heads are turned towards the witness, right? So their attention is towards the witness. And on rare occasion, remember, there's 17 people in the room on the jury at this juncture, right? We have 12 jurors and 5 alternates, 10 women, 7 men. 2 of them are of Asian descent, which we'll get to in a moment.
Wow.
I'm sure that's...
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was 1 or 2. It's 2.
It's 2. Yeah, I just didn't want to tweet that, but in my video today, and I'm telling you, it's 2 for sure. And they're sitting right next to each other. So the 17 heads, imagine it this way. Lally is asking questions of his witness. Their heads are all turned towards the witness. On occasion, a couple of them may, kind of turn like this. But they never fully, like, they give their, you can tell with the body. The body language is really telling. When you're interested in something, you're going to turn with your entire body and you're going to listen, right? Well, they kind of do this whole thing where their bodies are turned towards the witness because that's where the information is coming from. And then they'll occasionally kind of do one of these to Lally. When Jackson or Yannetti are up there, it's almost like we get a completely different juror in every single one of them for the most part. They're much more, they sit more upright, they're not as slouchy, and they turn their heads and their bodies sometimes. There was one gentleman in particular I noticed who is turning with his entire body every time. I don't know, it seems exhausting to do it, 40 times a day, 40 times an hour, I should say, actually. But irrelevant for purposes of our discussion. The point is, it's like watching a ping pong match, like the heads question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. They're so interested. They're hungry. They're starving for information, just like you and I are. We want to hear the truth. We want to know the information. We want to know what is going on. And so do they. So do they. And Alan Jackson and David Yannetti and Liza Little, she had a few witnesses herself, even though I didn't witness any of them on Wednesday because she didn't cross-examine anybody on Wednesday. I am certain, without a shadow of a doubt, if the pattern continues, which I don't doubt why it shouldn't, the defense is providing by far more information than the prosecution. And for 2 simple reasons. Number one, Lally doesn't really have a case, and it's hard to try a case when you don't have one. I have personal experience with prosecutors who prosecute my clients with not a shred of evidence. They're on my channel. You can go check them out at the DUI Guy Plus. But the reality is the defense skips the BS. They skip the potatoes and the garnish. They go straight for the steak, and they feed the steak to the jury, and they go, here you go. We don't want to waste your time. Yannetti, a couple of times during the trial so far, has even apologized. He's like, I'm sorry. I don't want to waste your time. We're going to skip through this. I don't want to go right in. He did that with Matt McCabe today in court. He said, I'm going to skip over this because he doesn't say those words, but we all know what they mean. I want to respect you, the jury, and your time. And I want to get to the important stuff. And so I think it's working. I've also seen some behind the scenes stuff that I don't want to comment on. But I can tell you that the way the defense is working is a well-oiled machine, and Lally is just asking whatever comes to his mind. And the problem with doing that as the prosecutor, you lose the jury. The actual important information is buried in between 95% of fluff, and that 95% of fluff drowns the 5% of important stuff, and the jury just glosses over it. And so that's how Lally is actually losing the case within losing his case. which is impressive. It's an impressive feat. I've not seen that in a very long time of being a double loss for a prosecutor. But hey, I mean, I'm not complaining. So the jury is definitely bored, and they're waiting for the defense's case to start. I have no doubt about it.
No, Larry, when you were there, was it who was getting crossed? Was it Allie McCabe?
So they just finished Julie Nagel.
Julie Nagel, that's right.
Julie Nagel was on Wednesday for those like 10, 15 minutes. David finally got her to admit that for the first time today, for the first time in history, you said, and to this jury, he pointed to them, it was beautiful. To this jury, he said, you said there was a blob, 6 foot blob in the snow, and she finally said yes, and he said, you're free to go, ma'am. After her was Allie. I always want to call her Allie McBeal. I don't know why. My head just popular.
I
culture,
call it
I guess.
Alibi McCabe.
Alibi McCabe is better. Allie. So Allie
good
direct
one,
and cross, and then Collins direct. So that was Wednesday.
Awesome. And so the jury seemed into that stuff, huh? They were paying attention when he was pointing.
Yes. And the crying, by the way, I just want to talk about the crying real quick, because there were some false narratives being perpetrated on the internet by people who have not been in the courtroom, and I have. So allow me to set the record straight and dispel any misconceptions people may have, which I doubt they do, but just for the record. The only person who fake cried, or even, tried to pretend cry, didn't cry, whatever you want to call it, Allie, was Allie. There was not a single juror that shed a tear when she had those emotions come up, which again, I'm firmly convinced she was upset at herself for saying when John was in the house, was the words that came out of her mouth. She was not upset at Colin being harassed or whatever, which again, I also think David came up to me at the end and he was like, he thought that made Allie a very sympathetic a very sympathetic witness to the jury. And I said, that's what I thought at first, David. And I even wrote it down. I said, but afterwards I looked at it again. And before I left, I told him, David, think about it this way. She just admitted to the entire jury that Colin was accused of murder, and they were harassed so bad to the point where it like drove her up the wall and made her feel all these feelings. So now the jury's starting to scratch their heads going, wait a minute. So why is Colin being accused of murder? That doesn't make any sense, right? So rather than look at it from she's now a sympathetic witness, which I don't think she was, it's difficult. I understand, David. It's very difficult when you're in the middle of trial to see. You're so focused on what's in front of you. Sometimes you have blinders on, and it's difficult. I don't blame him for it. That's why he has, internet, YouTube, Twitter. They're listening, folks. I will tell you this. This is the first time I think I've ever seen a defense team who is active, other than the Johnny Depp trial. That's the second. Okay, so this is the second time. That was the first time. They're reading, they're listening, and they're watching. David told me he watched my dissection of his opening statement. I couldn't believe my ears. I thought there was no way, but somebody sent it to him. He viewed it, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. My point with this is to say they are watching, folks. They know what's going on around this trial, and they're not just lasered in on the facts like Lally is. Lally is a hear no evil, speak no evil, because there's not a lot of chatter that helps him. Most of the chatter is for Karen Reed. And so as a result of that, the defense is paying attention.
Awesome. That's a lot of great information. So much to cover. Some of the texts that we were looking at today, you brought up the Asian issue. What do you think? We'll start with Mark. What do you think that will have an effect on those two jurors? You think, possibly?
Well, they're human beings, so I don't know how forgiving or unforgiving they're not. But if you're an Asian juror and you hear this buffoon use language like that, which, by the way, fits perfectly in with the whole stereotype of this whole group of people. We've talked about this before, and to be diplomatic about it, you can put a suit and tie on him, which he doesn't look very comfortable in, frankly. But these people, they're not classy people. Everything is drinking. they're crude, they're rude, and they're talking about, the Asian house. So how does that look? It doesn't look great. Is it that big a deal? I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it's going to matter anyway, just because how crappy the case is. And, we just heard another critique of Lally, and, you've certainly heard mine before. I think he's the worst prosecutor I've ever seen try a case, a serious case anyway, bar none. And that's not to be mean. That's just to be truthful in terms of what I'm watching. So I don't think that you're going to piss off these jurors. They're already probably not paying attention because he's so boring, because he's talking about the snow and other nonsense. Can it matter? Yes, it can matter. Do I think in the grand scheme of this case, it's that big a deal? No. I mean, there's certainly worse language than that, which we can all imagine, which might be a different thing. It's insensitive. It's not a good look, but you don't want the jury thinking about that, because that's the least. And these text messages, that's about important issue number 11 out of 10. You want them focused on the real stuff, which is they're getting their ducks in a row, circling the wagons. And I want to know what the cops know. Do they believe us? And here's the story. And you find out what's going on and all of that. And that's what really matters, not a stupid comment by this dope.
What do you think, Larry?
I agree. I agree with what Mark said. At the end of the day, the reason I think David even spent a minute on it, well, there's two reasons, actually. I can think of another one. First, there are 2 Asians on the jury, and that is not going to resonate well with them. But not even going that far, let's say they end up being the 2 alternates, let's say, right? And they're the ones who are going to go home randomly. Anything could happen. Is that going to change? Just like Mark said, is that going to change the outcome of the case with this one buffoon, one mongoloid has said? Of course not. But is it going to influence, like, just the fact that this is how he referred to his neighbors, the Asian house? It's just not a good look. It's a cumulative effect that it has on this trial, and it's a cumulative effect that they're trying to get imprinted onto this jury of, look, these are not friendly people, these are not good people. Don't expect them to, you're not invited to their barbecue. Let's just put it that way, because they hang around their own social circles. They have their own way of speaking. And it's just not a pretty way of talking about someone else. And it goes to show the character of a human being when their text messages, whom they did not expect will be ever shared in public, are dissected. Because you only talk like that, locker room talk, as we call it, I guess, right? It's when you talk amongst yourselves. You never expect anybody else to see it. And that's when you speak freely. And that's why it's so damning, because that's when they spoke freely. They were honest. They were themselves.
The other thing is this, yes, it's insensitive, but calling the Asian house isn't even the most offensive term in the text messages, as opposed to the guy. Yeah. Now, that's not racist, but that is a police officer dead on the lawn of another police officer.
Friend too. Friend.
That's how they're going to use it against him. All of these witnesses come in and say, "Oh, I love John, and he's a good guy, and we're friends," and this. But when the shit hits the fan and we have to clean up the mess, tell them that the guy never came in the house. And that is something that effective lawyers will focus on. The Asian thing is just kind of there. It's one of those, you don't even mention it. You just let it do what it's going to do. But I would be surprised if they didn't hammer home the guy, particularly because they all put forth this veneer of how much they liked him. And at the end of the day, he was just a corpse on their lawn that we need to clean up the mess and make sure it doesn't come back to us. These people are disgusting. And that's what those messages show. And the Asian stuff adds to it. The guy adds to it. Have Chris see what's going on with this. If you look at them all in the whole, it fits the image that you already had of these people. And this time, though, it's when they're in the raw. They're talking privately, as Larry just said, amongst themselves. never thinking anyone's ever going to see. And that's when you can tell how people are and what they're doing, when they're speaking comfortably and calmly and privately. And that's why everything in those messages is just so devastating for what's going to come on Tuesday.
Yeah.
We could.
And she's on that chain too. Remember that she's on that chain.
Yep.
Jen McCabe. Now she may not have communicated, but what is she going to do? Claim I never read the messages? I mean, that's impossible to believe. Clearly.